Okay, so hello to everyone. My name is Tan Harris, and I'm the Associate Director for Career Development. And I want to welcome you all to the Language Careers Utilizing Your Bilingual Spanish Skills. We have a great group of panelists here, and the discussion will be facilitated by one of our student leaders, Melanie. So I'm going to ask Melanie if you are ready to go ahead and get started with the introductions and the discussion.
Hello, everyone. So I am Melanie. So good afternoon again. A little bit about me. I am a junior studying statistics and criminology at UIC. So again, welcome to the Language Careers Utilizing Your Bilingual Spanish Skills webinar. Please note that this is an open discussion, that it is being recorded. So feel free to turn your camera off or on. We'd love to see your beautiful faces. And be sure to mute yourself just to be respectful of everyone who's talking and everyone around you. And if you have a comment or question, please feel free to put it in the chat or raise your hand when it is the Q&A time. But someone is monitoring the chat, so your question will be heard and seen. And so as we celebrate the Latinx Heritage Month, we want to create a program that would allow students such as myself, as well as members of the UIC community, to discuss our Spanish bilingual skills and bicultural knowledge as how it can be used in our individual career development journeys, as it's really important and it can really launch you further and to be successful. With that being said, we have gathered an amazing group of Latinx professionals who will share their experiences and offer advice on this important topic. But before we introduce our panelists, we would like to take this moment to give special thanks to my fellow planning committee members, Tatiana Carvajal, a co-chair for the Latinx Heritage Month, and she is studying electrical engineering, también at UIC, or also at UIC. There goes the bilingual speaking. And then Professor Ima Tabola, clinical assistant professor and director of undergraduate studies, Spanish in the LAS Hispanic and Italian Studies Department. Also, Jorge Mena, assistant director of the Latino Cultural Center, Jocelyn Chavez, program coordinator of the Latino Cultural Center, Gonzalo Trejo, an academic advisor and program specialist at Latin American Recruitment and Educational Services, also known as LATIS, and Tan Harrison, associate director of career development and career services. So with that being said, we can begin our discussion with our panelists. So an introduction with them, Alba Dillon, a bilingual educator, writer, media literary speaker, and Chicago Regional Emmy Award-winning investigative reporter during her career at Telemundo Chicago. Mario Lucero, a UIC LAS alum and strategist with the Nova Collective, a Black and woman-owned Chicago-based consulting firm. And Adrian Chavez, a UIC double alum and program manager for iMentor and non-profit mentorship organization. So thank you to our panelists and everyone who has joined us. Thank you for coming. And we can begin our first question if everyone's ready. All right, so simple question to start off. If you could please, each of you briefly describe yourself, introduce yourself, share information about yourself so that we can get to know you more. And you can include your educational and career background.
Thank you, Melanie. Alba, I saw you nodding your head, so go for it.
Okay. Hi, everyone. Thank you for inviting me to this panel. I'm very excited to talk to you. I'm Alba Mendiola Dillon. Dillon is my last name. My husband's last name. I was born in Mexico. And I went to school in Tec de Monterrey, where I studied science of communication. I got my undergrad there. And when I was in the last year before I graduated, I did something that completely changed my life, which was study abroad. I discovered this amazing world that I wasn't involved. Like you just, you go to school, you do what you're supposed to do. And then in the summer, I said, well, I really need to get out and discover the world. So I decided to take a study abroad program in Spain. So I went to Madrid and to the ICADE, the Pontificia Comillas University, very prestigious university there in Madrid. And I did a few classes there, and it was a life-changing experience for me because I travel a lot. I met a lot of people and from all over Europe, and I travel and I did all of that. I came back, I graduated from my bachelor's, and I decided that I needed to, learn more. I mean, I knew English. English was a language that I study in Mexico since I was in kindergarten, but I wanted to get better. So after I graduated from college, I studied in England for a year. I came back, long story short, I did a lot of PR, but then I did what I wanted to do, which was working in a television station. So I was a reporter for 2 years in the local station in TV Azteca in Jalapa. And I worked there for 2 years as a reporter. I enjoy every minute. And then I met El Gringo, right? So then I met the guy. So I'm here in Chicago now, married with but I actually started working in a non-for-profit organization connected to the Archdiocese. And I realized when I came here, the importance not to being just knowing another language and speaking 2 languages, but also getting to know the Latino culture in Chicago, the Chicagoans who live here, who have Mexican or a Hispanic heritage. That was new to me, and I had to learn that. Then I worked after a couple of years, and then I started working, went back to media, and I worked for Telemundo Chicago for 16 years until 5 years ago, I decided to quit because in my heart, it was always the teaching part. I love journalism, but I also love teaching. And now I have the opportunity to do both, which I'm ecstatic because I love teaching journalism. I'm teaching broadcast journalism to high school students, also public speaking and Spanish. So that's me. And I'm just gonna give Mario his chance to speak now.
Thank you, Alba, for sharing. I feel like it's always so challenging, right? When we have to tell our story like in a nutshell, because as you all know, we all have many stories to tell. And I think for the relevancy for all of you being here, it's great to see so many of you obviously trying to complete your studies at UIC. I'm going to share a little bit about my background of where I found myself around the time when I graduated with my bachelor's, and how my identity really helped me elevate my bilingual skills when it came to trying to figure out my career straight out of college. So just to start off, my name is Mario Lucero, pronouns he, him, his. I am a first generation Latino. I grew up in El Paso, Texas, but I grew up in the western suburbs of Chicago, specifically in Franklin Park, Melrose Park, and I moved around in the suburbs. My parents are Mexican immigrants from northern Mexico, de Durango and Chihuahua. And I basically grew up in a small barrio in Franklin Park. It was known as the Jungle. It was one of those communities of 100 apartment units, mostly built for immigrants, because there was a lot of factories around the community. And there was a demand for immigrant labor at the airport, at O'Hare. And so like many marginalized communities, especially when they're low income communities, it was a very low income, very neglected, low resource community. So, experiencing growing up with gang violence, gun violence in my community, lots of gang activity, experiencing lots of domestic violence within my own home. That was part of my upbringing and experience. So basically, growing up in that kind of neighborhood, it's normal to lose friends as you're growing up. It's really an honor to call myself a UIC graduate, right? Because even looking back to many of the friends that I started with, like since kindergarten, many of them did not even graduate high school, or are not even alive today, or are locked up for life. So I think that's a really important thing to to that really impacted my journey. And I was fortunate to be able to go to college. And so fast forward, I was grateful to have a few mentors that believed in me because I did not believe in myself, right? But thanks to those mentors, I was able to go to college. I majored in media arts and design. So I've always been an artist all my life. I should have been a scientist. I was always in those advanced like science classes, but I didn't think I was going to be able to be a scientist because I didn't see myself as a scientist. Didn't have anyone in my family that was a scientist. And so I'm like, Mario, just do art. You've been an artist all your life, so you can't fail at that. So I went into art. I was a top student in my class. And yet when I graduated in 2008, that was around when the housing market crashed and all that happened. I was not able to find a full-time job that was willing to pay me. Keep in mind, I'm the oldest of my family with 3 younger sisters, single mom, and all I was being offered was non-paid internships. I didn't have the privilege of working for free. And it still bugs me to this day just because I had so many good opportunities in art, but I was not willing to work for free. I couldn't do that. And so here's where the bilingual stuff comes in, right? It's like, I'm an artist. I'm supposedly this amazing, great artist with lots of skills, but I can't make a living. So then this opportunity came up where I'm suddenly working 3 jobs, and all the 3 jobs that I'm doing literally require my bilingual skills. One of the first ones is that my mom was trying to complete her GED at a community college. That's the high school equivalency program. And one of her teachers got to meet me and he's like, hey, Mario, you speak really good Spanish. Have you thought about being a teacher? And I'm like, that's ridiculous. I'm an artist. Why would I teach? So then they were like, well, we're struggling to find Spanish speaking teachers. You know, would you be willing to be part of a mentorship training program? And I've been teaching adult education since 2009 for about 10 years now. I'm not teaching right now because I have little babies, but that was one of the main things. And that was one of the 3 jobs that I had. The other 2 jobs I was working in sales, and literally I was hired because most of the customers are Spanish speaking, and that really came into play. And then I was literally working at a factory where all the workers were immigrants. And I love sharing that part of my story because ideally no one really thinks like I'm going to graduate with a degree and I'm going to go work at a factory where my parents have been working for their entire lives. I mean, I wasn't doing the hard labor. I was doing more of a coordinator behind the scenes managing work. But still, it was because of my bilingual skills that I was able to make a starting career for myself. And I'm very grateful for that. So I'll pass it over to Adrian. That's just a little bit of my upbringing and how I started implementing my bilingualism. So that was like 10 years back. So we'll fast forward later. Adrian.
Hi, everyone. Thank you, Mario. And hi, Melanie. And I know that hopefully you're doing well. I assume you are facilitating as well with Tan. I do apologize for having some technical issues, joining a little bit later than expected, but I'll go ahead and just briefly introduce myself and who I am and what I currently do right now. So I actually am a 2-time double alum from UIC. I'm very proud of that. Also have my pin and I'm wearing a UIC proud shirt. So I got my bachelor's degree in 2017 with the bachelor's degree in chemistry. So Mario definitely understand that sciencey, background and challenges regarding that. I also recently just earned my master's in education with the College of Education at UIC in 2021. So I'm very proud to utilize both of my degrees in both of my career paths, which I will then jump into. After I graduated with my bachelor's degree, I started working for the university in the admissions office. And that's where I kind of allude to this of learning more about where my bicultural background and understanding really came into play, working in many different schools, predominantly Latino or Latina or Latinx based, but a lot of them are also white or Caucasian or even African-American as well. So utilizing different types of backgrounds and my understanding of those backgrounds really came into play of how to really support those audiences and utilize, all of the experiences that I have and how I grew up. In addition to that, I then moved into a support program called Las Ganas, which is grant funded at UIC. Really great program along collaboration with Lopez. They do a lot of great opportunities, so got to put that plug in. But that was there for 2 years, and then now I transitioned into a new role as a program manager with a great nonprofit mentoring organization called iMentor. And we serve first generation and underrepresented, predominantly Latino, Latina, and Latinx students as well that are enrolling into higher education institutions. But yeah, I know that was really quickly, but that's me.
Thank you, Adrian, for answering that question and introducing yourself. It's really amazing how much we can do for ourselves, whether it's, doing something different, studying abroad, following your dreams, following, that passion that you have inside of you, even though if people tell you like, you're not going to go far with this, or whether you've never seen someone in your family take on that major or position, just go for it. So we'll go into our next question. Could you share how you began using your bilingual skills and or bicultural knowledge in your career journey? And we can start with Alba.
Okay. Well, like I said, I was born in Mexico, so my first job using English was here in Chicago. So the first job I had here in Chicago, like I said, I worked for a not-for-profit, and I was teaching adults job readiness skills. Like we were helping especially women who cannot get a job easily, or they have whatever, domestic abuse or whatever it is. It was a program that was in at DePaul University. I'm sorry, can you hear that noise? You hear that a horrible noise?
Yeah, I was wondering what that was.
Yeah, it's my computer. I'm so sorry.
It's a little buzz in the background,
Yeah.
but
Okay.
we can still hear you. So you're
Okay, good.
keep going.
Okay, sorry about that.
No problem.
Okay,
It's technology at its best.
Okay, so I did teach primarily Latino women, and it was really nice to me, like to learn what the Latino community was in Chicago, because I grew up in Mexico, and then like I said, I lived in other countries, and it was nice to help out like people who really needed help and in their skills. I remember, I was assigned one time to do the English class. They said, oh, but we don't have this teacher. Do you think you can do it in English for the mostly primarily African-American? And that was very like intimidating for me, because at that time, my English wasn't that good. I felt like, oh, can I do this? And I did it, and I had a wonderful time. It's just, learning about the African-American community. I was so excited. Like they participated more, like being from Mexico, or some people are more shy to, participate in a class or do, pretend, you're getting a job interview. Let's pretend that you're going to, do the interview. And in my communities, they're more shy. They don't want to do it. And for the, when I was doing the African-American community, it was just, they were like, oh, I'll do this. And I was so excited to be involved in that, to learn from other communities. Then I decided to go back to what I went to school for, like communication and journalism. And I got a job. I got a job in Telemundo. I'm sorry, not COVID, so I got a job in Telemundo as a reporter. And again, Telemundo is a sister station with NBC. So because of my bilingual skills, I was able to also work in stories in English and do projects with NBC. So and not just, sometimes, like when you have two stations, the Telemundo primarily work on the Hispanic community, and bread and butter is always, immigration issues and things like that. For NBC, you kind of have to teach them. You have to say, you should do this because this is important, not just for the Hispanic community, but for everybody to learn what immigration is about. So I felt that I was also teaching other, mainstream media what to cover, because they were not covering enough. So I think that was very good. And I like I said, I left Telemundo 5 years ago, and now I'm teaching Spanish in a Cristo Rey Jesuit High School, which is in Pilsen. And the majority of my students are heritage speakers. And I love it. It's just amazing. Those kids are so amazing. I love the fact that, I can connect with the parents. I tell the parents, I'm a mom, I'm a student at UIC, and I'm a teacher. And I understand what you're going through, trying to help your teenager son or daughter when they're going through problems, mental health. with the pandemic and things like that. I have teenagers too. So I think you can connect with people when you not just speak their language, but you understand their culture and where they're coming from.
Thank you. That was beautiful.
It was, and it's so perfect, Alba, because that last line that you said, it reminds me of what I started sharing, how I too have a background in teaching adult education. So when we're talking about adult education and community colleges, it ranges from students, young teenagers that don't finish high school, all the way to like older folks that, you know, when I was teaching, they could have been like my abuelitos or abuelitas. So it was really interesting. When I started teaching, literally, I think I was maybe 18 or 19 years old, and I was the youngest ever instructor as part of that adult education program at my local community college. And I really love what you said, Alba, because one of the major issues when I started teaching there, and they had me teaching in Spanish, was that retention was really, really hard. Most students would enroll, you know, with the good intentions of obviously finishing and getting their GED diploma, but the retention was like almost nobody went through the program and almost no one got the GED. So one of the things that I'm really proud of is that I don't know, I was new to this, right? And so I was able, now that I look back, I was using that bicultural knowledge that I had, because I was literally making the curriculum relevant to them. I still remember when I was teaching math, I was telling them about like how the Maya were like the best astronomers, and like telling them that it's like it's in like our heritage and like things like that, and empowering them that, you know, we can do math too. I remember for social studies, I was always making it relevant to their own histories, which obviously is not the case in the history books that were being used. And specifically because most of the folks that I was teaching or working with, they were from immigrant or undocumented community. Even when I was teaching like the Constitution class requirement for them to graduate, you know, it just made a lot more sense when I was making it relevant to like their status and their questions and how immigration impacted them. So I think it was really awesome. I think for all of you, if any of you here speak a different language or are learning a different language, I think it's probably one of your strongest assets, because regardless of your major, especially in this society, as everything is globalizing and we're becoming more and more diverse, and it's becoming like a top requirement for communication, and regardless what industry you work in, even understanding somebody else in a different language is huge. Like the way that I like to think about it is that when you're bilingual, you have access to two different worlds. You literally do. And then you serve as a bridge in connecting those different communities. So just fast forward a little bit, while I was teaching there, I started doing, because of the issues that I was hearing from people that lived in the communities where I grew up, I'm gonna give you a shout out, Jorge. So back in 2000, it was 2009, right? When y'all started IJO. So Jorge was one of the co-founders of the Immigrant Youth Justice League. And they were one of the first youth in the nation that were fighting for undocumented immigrant rights. So Jorge was one of those founders, but I lived in the suburbs. So I was one of the co-founders of another organization that we literally were following the lead of IJO, and we started something out there in the burbs, in the suburbs, because most people don't know, but there's like most of the Latinx population is now in the suburbs, right? And there was a huge need out there, and most of the folks that were getting deported were in the suburbs, yet a lot of the resources were in the city. So I got involved in a lot of community organizing. Actually, Jocelyn Mundia was involved with that organization I was working with. And that's what sparked my interest for social justice and really helping out the Latinx communities and communities of color and communities of need. So that's when I decided to go to UIC to pursue my master's in Latin American and Latino studies. And once again, when it came to teaching, and this is the last point that I'll share, one of the most rewarding memories that I had of teaching LALS classes at UIC was when you're teaching a class with hundreds of students, and many of them I identify as Latino, Latina, Latinx, when they would come up to me and tell me like, hey, I've never had a teacher that looks like me, or you're the only one that understands my experience. And so I'm just saying that because that's what happened to me too, as I was sharing earlier, of like those mentors that came into my life that they made me believe in myself. Representation really does matter. And I see so much diversity here. A lot of you are going to be future parts of the workforce, and you really have to bring your whole self, right? Your bilingualism, all different parts of your identities, because it matters. Representation matters, and you have to use that to your advantage, because there's a lot of people out there that without you even knowing, you're a motivation and inspiration to them. So I just wanted to share that. So thank you, Alba, for just reminding me about all this. Thank you, thank you.
Yeah, and then if I could, I know I'm not quite too sure on our time, but I also wanted to piggyback on both the points, especially the last line you mentioned, Alba, because understanding that, you know, not just knowing and understanding the language, but having the culture and understanding, you know, the community is really, really important, especially as you mentioned, Mario, that representation matters. In my personal experience growing up, I grew up in a household that was not predominantly Spanish speaking. So my Spanish has been, you know, at times at a 3rd grade level. There's of course conversations I could hold at the table, and there's other conversations that require a little bit more work. But one thing that I know that is strong within understanding the community of us as being Latinos and Latinas as well as Latinx is that we have the same culture that's still valuable, as well as our values that are really strong. Familia is extremely important, of course, in, you know, all of our families. And the togetherness in that bond, you know, is what keeps us being able to go through many of the challenges that we face, whether that's independently or whether that's also together. You know, things that you brought up that actually reminded me, Mario, was, you know, talking about immigration and statuses and things like that. A lot of the times when I was working in my work for admissions or just matriculation and enrollment, a lot of our students that we support could have undocumented parents. And with that, you know, limitation, it comes of like being scared sometimes to fill out the FAFSA application. So being able to have those conversations and understanding the culture of what that really consists of, rather in explaining like how, you know, understanding where they're coming from, understanding who they are, and what type of values we can actually, you know, have together is really, really critical in the work that I've done in the past, especially with admissions. That we deal with a lot of those application statuses and a lot of confidential information. So in the work that I've done before, understanding those types of values and understanding that culture has become a really critical asset in the work that I've done in the past and the work that all of us do. And I also wanted to piggyback too as well is that having the opportunity and having the skill set to speak more than one language in this country is a critical skill. And I would definitely encourage everyone else to utilize that skill if you do have that skill, because not only will it benefit you in the workplace, you know, moving forward, but you can also help someone else that is struggling with just having a conversation or communication. You know, communication is very critical. And it's the first point for us to understand each other so that we can move forward, you know, as a community as well as a nation.
Adrian, you said something that I want to emphasize. I'm so sorry, Melanie. I just want to emphasize because it's really important, because what you said, Adrian, about the bicultural knowledge is really important, because I just want to emphasize that because I know this is a criticism of some Latinos, like, oh, if you don't speak Spanish, you're not like Latina or Latino enough. And that's totally not true. You know, it was the same thing for me, Adrian. Like most people in my generation, as identified as a millennial, I was fortunate to get a bilingual education up to 3rd grade. But most of the people in my shoes, that's all the Spanish we learned up until 3rd grade Spanish. I was fortunate that I was just one of that very tiny percentage that I took it upon myself to learn Spanish in high school and after. But that's not the case. But that doesn't take away from our identities and the fact that we understand our communities, and that makes a whole difference when you're helping out those people in your community. So thank you, Adrian, for pointing that out. And then I once saw this meme. I don't know how many people have seen it, but I love to tell this because it's even like even our ancestors did not know Spanish. That is a colonizer's language, right? And so as we know in Mexico and in other Latin American countries, like there's so many different languages. And so, you know, do not let the fact that you may be a Latina or Latino or Latinx and you don't know Spanish take that away from your identity, because that does not define who you are. So thank you, Adrian.
Very well said. 100% agree. And I think the big and important theme that we see here is that representation matters, and it's very vital within our community, wherever we are, even as for students, whether it be in our study groups, being able to represent, our culture and being able to communicate with others who are in our group who might not feel comfortable communicating because of that language barrier or anything else. So thank you for that. So it does come into play, whether it's in school, whether it's in your community or career. So another question for our panelists is, how does your culture come into play in the work that you do? And also to our attendees, feel free to put in the chat any questions that you may have and we will get to them.
Okay, so here I'm in, and sorry for the noise again. It's going away soon. So I have to say something, we talk about family, we talk about culture, and we always try to, we should embrace that, the good things about, our culture. But I have to say also, we also have to question a few things and bear with me with the story I want to tell you. When I came to Chicago, a lot of people look at me, right? And they say, oh, where are you from? Like, from Mexico? No, but where are your parents from? Right? Like, from Mexico, but you don't look Mexican. And I'm like, well, how am I supposed to look like? Right? That and not just for any other non-Latino people, but the Mexicans here too. Oh, you're from Guadalajara. No, I'm from Veracruz, in fact. So like, there's always this questioning, like when you come here, you kind of have to fit in one category, right? What is the category of Latino you are? Sometimes among ourselves as well. I want to tell you another story. Very recently, last year, I decided to apply for this grant from the American Association of University Women. And they were giving me, paid for UIC, so I need the money. So I applied last November, and in April, they were going to tell us if we got the grant or not. And I was just like hoping, oh God, please, I'm just going to pray. I really need this money. I wish I get it. And one of the things that I have to write in my essay for this money was, how are you going to help young girls, especially, to go to college, like they can do a career in anything, but just to go to college. And I wrote this the story of my mom. She, I grew up in Mexico. She didn't finish high school, but she finished. She had a job in an old company, the Pemex, and she had a good position after learning a lot on the job. My dad had a 2-year associate degree in oil engineering. So he worked in Pemex as well. So thanks to that, I was able to go to a good college in Mexico. And I always said, like, my mom said, like, I wish you could stay here in the small town of Poza Rica, Veracruz, but you got to go to a big city and study. And I did. And that was the best decision that my parents did for me. And then I went to England and I went to Spain, and I'm here in Chicago, and I've been traveling all over. And I like that, the support that my parents did. And I want that for my students too. I want them to see the world and connect with other people, with other cultures. So that was my essay. And in April, when I was just waiting for the results, like, am I getting this money or not? Then suddenly I get the phone call from the college counseling. And they say, hey, Alba, we have a case that we have this girl. She got 100% scholarship to go to University of Illinois in Champaign. Everything is going to be paid. They're going to pay for her nails, right? Like everything. So, but her parents not sure if she should go. And I'm just like, oh my God, this is the sign. God is sending me a sign telling me that this is what I have to get involved and help this girl. So, and I did, the next day is when they told me, and I got the money. I was so thrilled. So it's like, I have to be in this meeting. I have to help out this girl. And this is what I'm talking about, our culture, because I tell parents with all the love that I can share with them, I'm a mom too, and I came to this country too, whatever the circumstances, we all have different circumstances, but you cannot stop your children from doing and pursuing what they want, because the family has to be all together. All every Sunday, we all eat tamales, and she's gonna miss the abuelita's tamales, and it's not fair. It really not. Like, you have to help them and achieve whatever they want to do. And like I said, this is something that I'm not saying in every family. Of course, there are many families who want to support their children, but I've seen cases, not just one or two, I've seen a couple where especially the girls struggle a lot. Like, they don't want to disappoint their parents, but at the same time, they want to do what they need to do. So when you have your children, if you have children, just think about that. Think about the importance of the culture and the community and the family. But think about also the individual and what they need to really succeed. I tell the parents, like, you took the whole trip all the way from, I don't know, Veracruz, Michoacan, whatever you came from, and you're here and you did it for your children. So, 2-3 hours away from Chicago is not going to make any difference. And then they have to succeed, and they have to do whatever they feel like it's good for them. So I was happy to say that at the end of that meeting, that the dad was like very pleased, like, yeah, I understand, mom is crying, dad is just like concerned. Then at the end, the girl went to college. So she went and took advantage of this scholarship. So it's just a matter of conversation to take the good things about the culture and the community, but also to understand that we are in a different country, right? Like, there's other, or just in general, it doesn't matter what country you are, I have to say, but you have to say that if you really want to do good for your children, you have to think about the individual as well.
Yeah, I would love to, thank you for sharing too. I would love to piggyback on that as well. And because I see that all the time in my work about, the culture is extremely strong and the values that we have are extremely strong. And sometimes the strength of that, just naturally blinds some of our own communities of what some of our students want to also identify with or even pursue. For example, some of the things that you mentioned, Alba, was the parents, the parent dynamic and the student dynamic is sometimes conflicting. As a matter of fact, oftentimes conflicting, is where as the parents and the community, we have this value as Latinos to be together, right? And to support each other. And that is taken extremely, physical at sometimes, to understand that, like, you can't go to college because you have siblings to, siblings and family to support as well, and to watch after school, or you can't attend that event, or you can't join that organization. And sometimes that creates these barriers for our students to really allow themselves to create new identities, or even create new skill sets and grow as a professional. There might be times too, as well, as one of our Latino students wants to study abroad, but they can't do that because it's a whole semester away from their family, of missing tradition at home during Christmas, or missing the family responsibilities. So I think that's a really great point that you mentioned. And I see that a lot of times, more often than I would like to mention, but more often it happens in my current role as well as my past, of that certain, some of our families would like to push our students into moving into a certain direction that they are not completely comfortable with, right? And this is in terms of choosing a specific college, or choosing a specific major, or even just choosing a specific career path that can limit them because of our culture and our values that we hold so strongly. And I think there's, positive things and there's pros to the culture that we embed ourselves with as a community, but there's also the cons that also might, limit that as well. So thank you for sharing. I really just wanted to highlight that because I see that a lot of times in my work. And specifically, a student I was working with 2 days ago mentioned how she was dealing with that to a point where she had to leave her own home in order to get out of that mindset and get out of that for the most part, like, toxic environment that she was currently in, and had to have that conversation. So if there's anybody, you know, definitely having those conversations, we definitely understand, we definitely hear you. And it's important too as well to understand that we, like as students, you are also growing into like your own adults. You know, if you're attending, you know, UIC for a specific major, make sure that it's because of your passion, right? In admissions, we would all the time, I would read stories on applications about first generation, you know, Latino students going to college because of the parents, because of the sacrifices. And while that's a beautiful thing to mention, a lot of times students often get too tangled in that and really start questioning themselves about why they're in the university in the first place. And sometimes it could have a backfire. So it is a difficult thing to juggle, but understanding the pros and cons and how to manage that, you know, and have support advisors at the university to have those conversations, you know, and to prepare that would be really, really critical.
I want to highlight a question that we have in the chat. So this is coming from Katia. If I mispronounce your name, please feel free to correct me. But how do we go about being assertive in the workplace when they want to utilize our bilingual abilities without paying us for more, or paying us more for it? Good question.
I have some examples. When I worked in Telemundo, how could I say this? Of course, you have two stations, right? One that broadcasts in English, NBC, and you have one that broadcasts in Spanish. And we do same job, but in different stations, right? Like you have reporters that only work for English and then reporters that only work for Spanish. At some point, the station, Comcast that owns Telemundo and NBC, and NBC in general as a parent company, wanted to have this, you know, you can work in both stations if you are bilingual, which is great. You know, like if you were in the higher for the NBC station, you get certain pay scale because they had a union, right, in NBC. But on the Telemundo station, if you were working with the Telemundo, they didn't have a union. So it was a different pay scale. And sometimes we were working in both stations, you know, working for both stations. So I think if you really want to, you know, use this, your bilingual skills in something like that, you really need to value yourself and fight for it. Because sometimes it's not going to be given to you. They're not going to say, oh, you are bilingual, I should pay you more. I mean, you should just say it. I need to get more pay. Sometimes we're quiet and we don't request it and we don't say it and we don't value ourselves. Because that's how I felt sometimes. I should have said something, right? When I was producing something for NBC, she's like, hey, am I getting extra pay because I'm working for the other station, right? And long story, that the whole thing, but yeah, I mean, you have to push for that. There is not going to come, you know, for free, or they're not going to, you know, offer it just like that. You have to ask for it.
I'll add something to that, Alba. I agree. And let's just say if increasing pay is not an option, or for whatever reason, it's a conversation that you know is not going to land right, or you're not ready to have a conversation, I would say that something is that as you are still developing professionally within that career and you are utilizing your bilingual skills, one thing that you could do that's probably a lot more doable is negotiate your title or what is your expertise so that it reflects in your professional growth. So sometimes even just a title change, as you are probably doing extra or more work there, will help you as a stepping stone for your next move in your career. So that was something that I would also keep in mind. If them paying you more is not an option, but at least you're getting something out of it in the moment to help you move forward.
So we do have another question in the chat. So can you share more about how other social identities play a role in your career? This kind of sparks from how we were talking about how experiences of being Black and Latino, you know, how it is in their community and just in general.
Well, I just mentioned that my experience, like the people see me, then they don't think that I'm Mexican. A lot of people think I'm Polish. I know my accent and the way I look, and they see me. And I've been in places where, like in a restaurant where I can hear people speaking Spanish and saying bad words and, talking, judging people. And I said like, hey, I understand you. Like I've been in those places like that, but it's just a matter of, I don't know. It's not that you have to be in the world saying I'm Latina and then, I don't know, but sometimes, your accent or the way you speak but I think it's just about understanding that we are all here, right? Like we are from different backgrounds and in different places, and just, I think things are changing a lot now recently with new generations. We are more open to accept without judging, maybe, or I don't know, like, but among Latinos, that happens too. Like there, we see, oh, he is from this place, but not that place, or, speaks better Spanish or bad Spanish or whatever it is. So we tend to do that as well. I think we need to understand that we have to, accept who we are, as a community in general.
Yeah, one thing that I'll add, as Alba was saying, like times are changing, and then that's also let's be real and acknowledge the fact that things have changed since 2020 after George Floyd was murdered. And I can tell you this because the job that I do now as a diversity, equity, and inclusion strategist and consultants, I work with all kinds of companies across every industry: tech, communications, healthcare, education, everything. And I can tell you that most institutions are mostly white, and they're all being held accountable by all of you, their future employees, because a lot of the millennials or Gen Zs going into the workforce, they don't want to work for a company where inclusion is not valued. And so I just have to say that, your social identities and your lived experiences are actually starting to be valued right now as one of the qualifications for current and potential hires, because a lot of these companies are being held accountable. Like, I know that there was a lot of organizing in the streets, but let me tell you that there's a lot of organizing inside these workplaces now, because everyone is demanding for their voices to be heard, and everyone's demanding for more accountability. So I would say that even to the question of like Santiago Fernandez about bilingual being an asset in STEM, honestly, is every industry. If you're bringing any part of your social identity that has been historically excluded or not represented in many of these companies, it's really valuable, because you'll be part of cultivating and creating that culture in many of these companies that I'm working with. So definitely leverage that and know your worth.
And just to highlight, the question that Santiago had asked was, could being bilingual be an asset in STEM/technical fields? If so, how could you market yourself in these aspects? And Adrian gave a great response of, yes, even if you're not using the skills directly, your bilingual skills align with creativity and ability to think differently in the workplaces. And there are even studies explaining this, and highlighting this could help you in your future. If you had anything else to add, Adrian, you can definitely do that.
Yeah, absolutely. Just really quick as well, Mario brought up a great point about, understanding and hearing a voice that's not being said at the table, right? Even if you're not utilizing the skill directly, because we have to remember, being bilingual is having that additional skill that others at the workplace don't have. It's not just understanding, a completely different culture in a workplace, but it's also having a communication tool. And that communication tool, proven by studies, have shown and aligned with creativity. Even if individuals have been, constantly studying a new skill or studying a new language, it is aligned very strongly with creativity and thinking outside the box. So this can, really be critical, especially in any field, but especially STEM and technology, where creativity is extremely important. especially for, coding based things, in terms of if any of you all have an iPhone, they recently just updated, my Safari is completely different. I don't know why, but a lot of that has become because of, physical as well as like cultural voices that aren't being heard at the table, that they've now decided to change their algorithm to include those voices now and to include, those types of identities that utilize those devices. So, but yeah, you can definitely utilize any type of skill, especially your bilingual skill, because it helps you be more creative in your workplace.
Thank you. So our next question for our panelists is, in your career, did you ever experience a moment where you considered code switching? So that means change the way you talked or held back in using your bicultural knowledge in order to fit in the job.
Well, I have to say that, especially like working in television, work in Telemundo, you have the meetings and everything, the producers and the directors and everybody in the studio, when they are all Spanish speaking, there is a way, you don't have to give too much explanations of things, right? But when you have to work with the other side, then you kind of have to explain a lot of things. But I have to say that, for example, the Spanish that I use for television, right? Like how I express myself, I had to really, in the newsroom in Telemundo, there were people from all over, like there were Mexicans, there were Peruvians and Guatemalans and Colombians. And we always have this struggle, like, how are we going to say things? Is it going to be, like la acera instead of banqueta, like the sidewalk? And it was always the struggle of how we're going to talk so everybody understands for television. But my code switching here, I would say, when I go and interview somebody, like you have to, like somebody who didn't have much education, maybe third grade in Mexico, right? Like they don't understand your, advanced Spanish. You have to kind of go lower and use very simple words to interview the person. And you have to kind of explain things more in a way that they understand. I feel the same way sometimes, when speaking with my the parents that for my students as well. And then when you interview, I don't know, a politician, right? Coming from Mexico, I was in press conferences with a Mexican president. So you change there, the way you speak and the way you present yourself. Yeah, I think that could be seen also within the Latino community. Like we all speak Spanish, but it's a beautiful language where you can say so many, different ways the same thing.
Yeah, I know for me, I definitely have code switched many times. In fact, I still do it to this day because of the work that I currently do. I work with both students and also adults simultaneously at times where in the same Zoom meeting, I am code switching, in front of them. And obviously they can tell based on that, but it's because I'm trying to provide a service and support that is most important through being relatable. I think for all of us, we can understand that, we enjoy common interest. We enjoy talking to people and hanging out with people that we have a common interest and commonalities who can relate to us and that can understand us. So whether the community is, Latin based or underrepresented or even just white or Caucasian, we understand that it's our similarities that align us into, having this togetherness. And being able to support each other and service each other. So code switching between, even just some of the things that I would mention to a student, I would definitely frame it a little bit differently to one of our adult mentors that I work with, right? Or even code switching based on ethnicities or backgrounds, or even just depending on where they're coming from, based in the city of Chicago, or if they're coming from California and knowing some of the cultures through there. So it's really has been a critical, characteristic or a critical skill that I've learned, growing up and utilizing it to help me understand that I can be relatable, and being able to connect with others has been very important not just for me in terms of building relationships in the workplace, but also understanding that we are, together, and we are trying to provide a service to better support the students overall.
Yeah, I'll just add really quickly. Those are all great stories and points. Thank you, Alva and Adrian. I feel like code switching, if you identify as a person of color growing up in the US, and having and if interacting it, for my experience, interacting with white folks or other people that may not understand your background or your culture, I feel like code switching is obviously a survival mechanism, right? And I've definitely code switched a lot throughout my career and my life. But one thing that I do want to say is that to the question that Leslie Rios posted in the chat on tips on overcoming imposter syndrome, I feel like I've reached a point in my career where I no longer feel the need to code switch because I am confident that I am a professional and I could also be myself. And so because code switching is also taxing and it's tiresome. And it's great because even with the strategy work that I do right now in consulting, I'm literally getting paid to bring my lived experience to the table, like Adrian was saying, because our voices have not been included in many of these industries. And so I think that's really, I think on tips for overcoming imposter syndrome is just understanding that, your different perspective and your different parts of your identities do bring a lot of value to the work that you do, because Adrian is right. There's tons of research that says that with diversity and diversity of thought and cultural backgrounds and all that, there is more innovation. That's been established and that's been clear. And we want to do it for the right reasons, right? Not just because it's more profitable, but because it's the right thing to do. But I think that would be the goal for a lot of us that find ourselves code switching, is getting to that point where you feel really proud of all the different parts of your identities, and that you are still that professional Latinx or whatever your identity is, regardless of how you present yourself. So that's what I would say.
Thank you so much for all your responses. And yes, it's all about that, that confidence and self-respect. Definitely putting that out there. Thank you. So as we reach the end of our program, do you have any final words of advice that you would like to share with our attendees? And also if you wanted to touch on the imposter syndrome tips.
So for me, it's my first recommendation I give to everybody is, especially for those who were born here in the United States, speak two languages, one at home in Spanish or whatever other language you speak at home, and you speak English as well. This is a time, learn a third language. Go travel, go somewhere else, and learn the culture that you're not familiar with. That will give you even an extra set of skills that it's needed. And I noticed that, for example, my students, they're here in school and they go to Mexico and they stay with abuelita or their tío, grandparents, or family members in Mexico. They do have they speak Spanish, but they do have a hard time sometimes understanding the culture in sticking to Spanish, right? Like they want to go English and Spanish, and then they realize that not everybody's going to understand them. So it is important not just to know the language, but it's being involved and immersed in that specific culture, not just in the United States, but abroad. So my best recommendation is take advantage of the study abroad programs that UIC offers and go and meet people and travel and explore the world. And in terms of the code switching and the imposter syndrome, I will say, I think that's an advantage. You're able to talk to anybody, right? In your own language. I see it as you're multilingual in your own multilingual community. So I don't see it as a disadvantage or something that you have to feel, I don't know, embarrassed about, or I don't know. It's just like you are able to communicate to anybody. It's like you can talk to adults and you can talk to children. You can talk to somebody in Spanish and you can talk to somebody from Colombia or understand different cultures. It's just being so open to talk to anybody. So yeah, that's my recommendation.
Yeah, one thing I can definitely, highlight as well is thank you, Alba, for mentioning all of that, because it really aligns, in terms of like how I grew up, and some of the recommendations I will definitely, choose and or quite mention is that how I grew up was in kind of like a broken household where we didn't speak a lot of Spanish, as I mentioned, but I also grew up in a neighborhood that was predominantly African American and Black. So because of that community and because of all of my friends, I felt that there was no need really to utilize Spanish and to learn more about that. But as I started growing up and being more involved in the culture, that our roots are from, as well as, the community, and starting to kind of learn more about what's out there, and traveling more, I've learned that it's not only just an identity thing, but it's also a cultural thing that we can have, and that's so valuable. Being able to code switch is definitely a strength, whether that is being multilingual, bilingual, or just speaking one language. It's a way for us to understand each other, to relate with each other, and to communicate, some of the challenges or barriers that we're trying to overcome together. One of the biggest things, that I learned growing up is that I learned and grew up as being like a first generation Latino male, but I didn't fully identify that until I was in college, because I then started to understand this imposter syndrome. I started to understand the cultural differences and what was actually like, in my household. As I mentioned in the chat before, my mom still used the chancla, trying to get me and trying to discipline me. She would also say, cierra la puerta, like, trying to close the door, don't let the air out, anything like that. So a lot of that actually opened my eyes, and I actually saw that it was there in my household, even if the language, wasn't as explicit or as clear, and us utilizing that. So my biggest recommendation as well has to align with Alba too, as well as is understanding that, definitely explore all the identities, understand your value, understand that like your bilingualism or multilingualism is a skill set. Don't think that it's just how I grew up. Understand that it is a skill set, because as you grow and start doing more internships and doing more full-time positions and workplace opportunities, you'll learn that that is a skill set that is extremely valuable in any workplace. And it allows you to not only think differently and be creative, be innovative and communicate to the voice and bring the voice at the table that is not being heard. So that's definitely something that I, would strongly recommend. And I am so grateful to still identify as a Latino male, even if I'm not fluent in Spanish.
Yeah, I know we're over time, so I'll just add quickly. As Adrian was saying, the fact that all of you are UIC students, take advantage of the fact that UIC has one of the most diverse student bodies probably in the nation. So I'll put here in the chat, even though it is very important to understand your own identity and your culture and using that as an asset, as Adrian was saying, like those intercultural skills that you are hopefully developing as a college student right now are also really important and will be a very critical part of your success in the workforce. So take advantage. I mean, how many other universities have 7 different cultural centers? So if you haven't visited them, check them out. And yeah, take advantage of the resources that you have at UIC to start having those conversations about what does your cultural heritage mean and what your identity means in relationship to others, right? And start building that community. So thank you all.
So thank you again to our panelists. I'd like to give a special thanks to our wonderful panelists, Alba Dylan, Mario Lucero, and Adrian Villarreal. He had to leave, but thank you for coming. Also, thanks to the Language Careers Planning Committee and to you, the members of the UIC community who attended this event. We do have this recorded, so you can visit this back and rewatch it. We hope that the engaging discussion has been helpful to you as you go through your career development journey. Before we go, please note that a survey will be sent to you via email. So please be sure to log into your Handshake account to complete it, and your feedback is important and appreciated. As we close, we will stay on Zoom for a few minutes to answer any questions. If you do not have any questions, thank you again for attending the event, and take care and have a great day.
Thank you, Melanie.
Thank you for the invitation.
Thank you for your time and your stories and experiences. And for the students who are asking where can they find the recording, Tan or Jorge, where can they find it?
Thank you for that question. We will be sure to email the recording later this week to everyone who attended. And so, yes, everyone should receive that recording later this week.
All right.
Hi, may I ask a question?
Yes, of course.
So my name is Morel and I am not a Latina, but I am learning Spanish and I joined in for the sake of, I only wanted motivation to continue with my goal. So I wanted to check how far ahead I am in my journey and how learning Spanish will help me. And I can gladly say that I am a lot more motivated to reach my goal. I just wanted to know if there is some organization or some community at UIC where they practice Spanish speaking, because when I started learning, I started with Spanish from Spain, but now I'm more towards Spanish from Argentina because my friends are from there. So I get really confused. I was wondering if there is any club or a meeting where non-Spanish speakers can participate and practice.
I'm looking at Inma. I'm wondering if there is.
Yeah, we used to have the coffee hour, but with the pandemic, we had to cancel it or suspend it. Hopefully next semester we'll have it again. If you are taking Spanish classes, I'm not sure, you probably receive a lot of emails from me. So I will send emails about it once we're back to the coffee hour.
I'm not taking Spanish as my foreign language because I believe that because there is a very large Spanish speaking population here, how better it is to learn a language than practice with a native speaker. So I didn't think I should spend my money learning Spanish when I can just learn from native speakers. But maybe if you could add me to your email list, that would be great. I want to seize every opportunity to speak Spanish or just learn.
Okay.
I have a suggestion. I'm sorry.
No, I was gonna say I can add you if you want, but you're gonna be receiving tons of emails for Spanish majors and minors. Just as far as you are aware of that, I can add you to the listserv.
I have a suggestion for you. My suggestion, what's your major? What are you studying?
So I'm a biological science major, but I will be switching to environmental sciences with a minors in nutrition and Russian.
Okay. So my suggestion, for example, what you can do, you can volunteer. You can volunteer in an organization. You can go to a kindergarten to start talking Spanish to little kids. It's the best way to, they don't judge you, right? You can just freely feel like you're talking to somebody and they will, talk to you. There are organizations in the environment. They're in Little Village and Pilsen. There's churches that you can get involved in, food pantries that all the people there speak Spanish. There's ways to get involved. The community's out there, and it's just a matter of you getting involved in those, and it's free, and you're helping. So that would be good.
Yeah, it sounds perfect. And my interests are very similar to yours. Like you mentioned, studying abroad in Spain. So I'm really looking into that. So I hope that will be a very big booster for my language learning goals. Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Yeah, take a tour. Pick a country in Spain or South America. I just went to Peru. I loved it. So yeah, go for it.
Thank you.